And the one thing that I learned moving to the go-to-market side here at Mural, post-sales customer relationships and things like that, is just as a really kind of high-level tip, is growth. The word growth, the idea of growth. If I were to go back and redo my UX career over, I would be using the word growth like punctuation, right?
Welcome to Insights Unlocked, an original podcast from UserTesting, where we bring you candid conversations and stories with the thinkers, doers, and builders behind some of the most successful digital products and experiences in the world, from concept to execution.
Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Aaron Diocampo, Brand Content Production Manager at UserTesting, and joining us today as host is UserTesting's Lija Hogan, Principal for Experience Research Strategy. Welcome to the show, Lija.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
And our guest today is Jim Kalbach, a leading expert in UX, design strategy, and customer experience. Jim is the Chief Evangelist at Mural, where he helps organizations collaborate visually and think more strategically about design and innovation. He is also the author of several influential books, including Mapping Experiences and the Jobs to Be Done Playbook. With a background spanning UX research, product design, and business strategy, Jim has worked with companies of all sizes to create customer-centric solutions. Today, we're excited to dive deep into his insights on jobs to be done, experience mapping, and how AI is shaping the future of research. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Well, that's a great way to kick off the conversation because I'm even more excited to have this conversation. And first, really want to start with congratulating you on your recent 10-year anniversary at Mural, which, as we all know, with the speed at which things move in technology, that's a good long run. And you've had an incredible career that spans design and customer experience and business strategy and just like all the things. And so I kind of want to take you back actually to start with, what originally drew you into this space at the intersection of all of those different disciplines. And then also just how has your perspective evolved over your time in this space?
Yeah. Great question. I think I'd have to go back to my studies at Rutgers University. I started with a degree in music, but then after graduating, I went back to grad school and got a degree in information science. And that was at a time when, the internet was just coming around and, email and things like that. So I got online at the time, through Rutgers very early on. I was surfing the web and I had an email account back in the early 90s. And that got me really, attuned to, online, experiences. But then from there, I moved to information architecture. So my information science, degree, set me squarely up for an information architect role, which of course includes usability and a lot of the things that we would call UX these days. And then I, continued working in that field, both internally and externally, for large companies on the one hand, in a large product design team, but also as a consultant in a couple of roles externally for design and innovation projects and things like that. When I came to Mural, though, I took a sidestep. And I actually then headed up what we called our customer experience team. And that included customer success, which is post-sales account relationships, the support team, and our services team as well, too. Which has to do with experience. And I think that's the common thread, right? Going from UX to a more CX kind of thing. It's really about the customer and their experience, but the medium in which I was creating those experience changed from pixels and screens to enablement sessions and onboarding flows and things like that. And then in 2020, I became the Chief Evangelist here at Mural, when the pandemic started. And it's an interesting role because I have kind of a helicopter view of things. And by that, I mean, I work with some of our, biggest and best accounts which puts me in touch with design teams of all kinds in all kinds of industries around the world. So although I'm not really practicing UX per se or design per se, I get to work with lots of teams in different situations. So that keeps me in touch with what's going on.
Yeah, I think that is like the perfect blend of experiences to give you a lot of wisdom about like how to do the work and why to do the work and how to make the business case to do the work. And so, I think from there, I just want to shift gears and talk about the fact that obviously you wrote a really, I think, helpful book around the jobs to be done framework. And it's been around for a while. So I think you bring your own perspective to it. But I'd love to hear more about how you think that framework has evolved from its, original evolution, right?
Yep.
Or how it originally was envisioned to work.
Right.
And how it can be really leveraged in this very quickly changing business context.
Yeah, sure. So I got in touch with Jobs to Be Done, or I first came across the concept in about 2003 when a gentleman named Tony Ulwick wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review. I think it was Turn Customer Input into Innovation, right? And that was really when I started to get into his method in particular, which he calls ODI, outcome-driven innovation. Just prior to that, though, Clayton Christensen, very famous business thought leader. Unfortunately, he passed away a number of years ago, but he kind of coined the term or popularized the term in his follow-up book to the Innovator's Dilemma called The Innovator's Solution. But if you look at, let's just start from Clayton Christensen in the stratosphere in terms of business consulting and advice, right? He would hobnob with the CEOs of the world's largest companies and talk strategy at that super, super high level, right? And then even Tony Ulwick at Strategian with his ODI, he was also leveraging some of the principles of Jobs to Be Done at a fairly strategic level, thinking about how do you think about your markets differently? And when I say markets, I mean like segmentation of your market and what's the overall value and value proposition at the highest level, right? And since then, there's been some other flavors and other practitioners. But for me in 2003, kind of on the ground in the middle of a design team, right? I was like, you know what? I think this can also help me and my team think through problem solving and designs and things like that. And I think it was that perspective that kind of comes out. I hope it comes out in my book. I'm not a consultant, so I don't go in and consult CEOs and give them a nice answer in a PowerPoint deck. I want to position and think about Jobs to Be Done as something anyone can use in part or in whole. It's almost a mindset that I want to be able to bring to literally everybody, right? So the evolution that I just painted is, Jobs to Be Done as a high level strategic notion from Clayton Christensen to kind of this, strategic consulting model. It was very systematic and very, very rigorous. And for me, it's kind of bringing it down and saying, no, there's value in Jobs to Be Done thinking that anybody can tap into and anybody can leverage, even in just small ways through the course of their, project development or whatever they're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful concept because there's so much rigor in the Ulwick frameworks and just, I see these beautifully constructed interview guides and scripts and research plans that come out of researchers. But there's also just you can listen to people piece that I think is really powerful for folks and very common sense.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The other thing about Jobs to Be Done too is, coming from human-centered design and design thinking and UX, it's very hard at times for designers and design teams to catch the ear of stakeholders or, to get the proverbial seat at the table that we always talk about. And the thing for Jobs to Be Done for me is that it not only resonated to me as a human-centered designer, it's like, wow, this is exactly my thinking, but on steroids. I also found out that it appealed to stakeholders in a different way. Because it came from the design, it didn't come from the design community. It came from the business community, right? And there's Harvard Business Review articles on this stuff, right? And even though underneath, right, it's really about we provide value to human beings who have needs, right? That's what UX is about. That's what customer experience is about. If you boil it down to that, it's the same thing underneath. I think the framing of it through the jobs to be done lens actually helped me. I don't want to say push my agenda because it wasn't an agenda, but bring the cause of customer centricity, bring new light to the cause of customer centricity. So jobs to be done, helped me get a seat at the table, or as I like to say, help me get a customer the seat at the table, because I don't want a seat at the table. I want the customer to have a seat at the table.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great point, because that's obviously something that a lot of teams in UX and design are really struggling with right now. Like, how do we get the buy-in and the ear of our business partners to just give us the time and the space to say, there's another perspective outside the room that should
That's
be
right.
here. So I think, and this is a little bit of a different question. So you say that you do that, but how do you do that? Like, how do you connect to that very visceral, like, I understand,
yes,
as a business partner?
I think, just sticking with jobs to be done for a second. I think it's, for me, there's a couple of tactics there. One is to find a business stakeholder as high level as you can who not only gets jobs to be done, but would be willing to be a kind of a champion for it, right? And that's what happened to me early in my career, particularly around mapping and mapping experiences. And, I had high level support, and doors got opened that way, because it's always nice to have a little bit of weight behind your motions and your decisions from above, right? But also getting a proof point, get a case study together that you can say, hey, we did this, and show that around. Right. So, I think the jobs to be done label and positioning and posture helped with all of those things as well. But I also think it's about having more empathy for our business stakeholders. Right. And this sounds weird because designers are all about empathy, and we have empathy maps and all that kind of stuff. Is like, point that stuff back at your business. I was the angry UX designer. Why don't they get it? And it was us and them, right? It was the turtlenecks and the suits, and they don't get it, right? It's like, drop that division in your mind and say, they do know things that you don't know, and there are business things that you need to learn, and their motivations are different. Go understand those motivations and apply design thinking or whatever methodology you want to think to your own teams and your own stakeholders. And the one thing that I learned moving to the go-to-market side here at Mural, post-sales customer relationships and things like that, is just as a really kind of high-level tip, is growth. The word growth, the idea of growth. If I were to go back and redo my UX career over, I would be using the word growth like punctuation, right? Because very often UX and usability and things like that are positioned as cost savings and friction savings and customer experience, right? Either, we'll reduce the number of calls to the call center. That's money, right? So invest in us and you'll save more money, right? Or customer satisfaction is better. That saves you money. If you flip the script and say, we'll earn you more money, and make a revenue generator out of UX. However you need to argue that, that's a more powerful argument. Because most business leaders will say, we grow through more sales and marketing. Those are revenue generators. And why? Because they want to grow. And there's a belief in the business mindset that growth comes through sales or marketing, not from UX. I disagree. And of course, now we have product-led growth and all these other things, right? And I think it's about making that case of how does UX and design and research not just save costs and save friction and bad experiences, how does it drive growth for the business? And I would just start using that word all over the place.
I think you just like if all people do is just listen to this far into the podcast, they will come away with a really powerful piece because I think a lot of what it is that we do is speak about risk and how we can de-risk or
De-risk.
create,
That's right.
space
That's right.
to ensure that you can optimize the time that you're spending to, not rework something. But that growth piece is where product teams and other teams are, and business people really do understand that revenue side.
Exactly. It's a powerful shift. Yeah, de-risking is preventing risk, or incurring costs, preventing incurring costs. If you flip the script to we're going to make you more money, right? And you can argue that somehow, right? You know who does that really well? A/B testing. The A/B testing group, the statistical A/B testing group, they're really good at that because they'll say, I will tell you which workflow, which experience will generate you more revenue, right? And it's those types of arguments that I think the UX field in general has not embraced, or really, like, we really got to dive deep and find what are those things where it's growth, and flip the script from we'll de-risk and we'll save you money to we're a revenue generator as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. So
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, sure.
Well, to that end, I guess what are some of the ways that you can use jobs to be done
Yeah.
to flip that script and say, like, how do we grow revenue? How do we open up new markets? How do we grow our business?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an innovation diffusionist. I don't know if that's a word, but I actually got introduced to human-centered design and human-centered innovation through Everett Rogers. And he wrote a book called The Diffusions of Innovations. It's the most famous book that nobody knows about. That's the way I like to describe it, because we all know some of his theories from there. And the one theory is the innovation adoption curve. The innovators, the laggers, the middle majority. That's from Everett Rogers and in that book. And when I was at information school, we had to read that. And that's where I really started to think, wow, it's all about the human. And that's what made me human-centered. The reason why I mention that is because his book is a humanistic way to look at adoption of innovation. Why do human beings, the people that you serve, why do they adopt one solution over another? And what is that adoption process, right? And so for me, Jobs to Be Done is a way to help a commercial organization predict adoption, right? Which is not sales. It's not about demand generation. Sales is transactional. It's about, okay, I bought this thing. That's only part of the story. It's not an insignificant part of the story, but that's only part of the story. What we really want to do as service providers and innovations is have something that people adopt and pull into their lives and go, how did you know I needed this? Thank you so much. That's where you get brand loyalty. That's where you get customer response. And the way that we say that these days is product market fit. And product market fit is about revenue generating, right? Because you want to generate more revenue, you need better product market fit. Jobs to Be Done can help you predict what those pull factors are going to be. And in the Jobs to Be Done theory, it basically states that people pull solutions into their lives that get a job done better than other solutions, right? So therefore, if we can study the job to be done in an abstract way, because the job is not using your product, the job is a goal that somebody has, right? Independent of your, so there's a really human behavior, right? And who better to talk about human behavior than UX people and user researchers, right? So you can take all that goodness that you know as a UX researcher and point it at adoption in a business context and say, I'll make you more revenue by creating market pull. So that's a little bit theoretical, but I hope that answered your question.
I actually think that's very practical.
Yeah. Okay, good.
It says that I'm like, oh, I wish I had assigned that book to our students this term. But I mean, I think it actually makes a lot of sense because it really is the simple question when you're out working with people. It's just understanding what are the problems that they're trying to solve,
Yeah,
and how can we create a solution that is like priced appropriately, positioned appropriately, delivered in the right way that is going to drive value for the customers and thereby help out drive value as a business.
Yeah. But it's all about starting with the solution, working back. Because typically what we do is, I'm just going to oversimplify here. Okay, guys. We have a technology or solution that we're passionate with, and then we bundle that up into an offering. And then we scratch our head and say, how much are we going to charge for this? Right. And then we increase marketing and sales to push that on the market and generate demand. Right. If you flip that script and say, what is the need that if we fulfill that, there will be adoption, and then you work backwards through all of those motions. It's different. It's a different thought process and mindset shift. And what that does, it makes your sales easier. It makes your marketing easier, right? Because very often, we've seen it before, and this is why startups fail, right? And I encourage everybody right now to go Google, why do startups fail? If you're listening to me, Google, why do startups fail? I guarantee out of the top 10, because there's all these top 10 lists out there. In the top 3, one answer in the top 3 will be, we didn't understand the market needs, right? And then you see this all the time where people, a startup or whatever comes out with a product, and then they push the gas with sales and marketing, and they're pushing it up against a lethargic market because there's no pull. And they're really trying to push it. What you want is product market fit so that all of those motions are much easier. Don't solve it at the point of sales and marketing. Solve it at the point of, we met a job to be done and we have natural adoption in the marketplace.
Oh, I love it. That's gold.
But any UX designer or researcher listening, they'll know what I mean. Oh yeah, I can imagine how I would do that, right? Mm-hmm. That's not a mystery for us.
It's not a mystery for us, but I think it's getting people to slow down enough to say, we have to flip the script if we want to be successful. And it's like getting people to really buy into that. We're going to make more money. We're going to do it more easily if we do it this way.
No, I agree. And, I just asked this question 2 days ago when I was presenting to a customer. Have you ever been on a project and three months in or 6 months in, you and your team are scratching your head going, why are we doing this? Right. And everybody laughed. And the laugh was basically, yeah, we've all worked on those types of projects before. And for me, the thing that doing jobs to be done up front, it provides a very strong rationale, customer-centric rationale for what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it allows teams to focus on the right things for the right reasons, right? Because I've never worked for or with an organization that lacks ideas. This is another question I ask. Is it the problem? Is your company's problem you don't have any ideas? You're just sitting there going, I wish I had an idea on what. It's usually the opposite. You have a backlog. I mean, that's the definition of a backlog. You have a backlog of ideas, and everybody at happy hour solves their company's problems. We should be doing, there's ideas swimming around any organization at any one point in time. The question is, which should we do? And very often we bring a logic to prioritize those ideas that are based on finance or technology or stakeholder preference or some thin data points, right? And it's like, when I said bring the customer to the table, I want to bring the customer to that prioritization table, right? And that's what Jobs to be Done can help you do, because it's generally very far up front, right? So once you have signal on the job to be done and the unmet need, using something as, sophisticated as ODI or even a lighter version like I teach, right? You can then say, okay, maybe we should use this as the reason to prioritize the backlog. And the reason is so that we have better market adoption and the throughput of sales and all the other things that need to happen is so much easier. That's actually that saves you time and money, right? Think all the churn and project turnover and stops and starts and do-overs and product launch failures that the company has. And it's like, you'll probably still have those because Jobs to be Done doesn't eliminate it, but it reduces the chance of those types of things happening.
Yeah.
And that goes, I know I'm talking to the choir here, but it goes back to, what does the human being, the individual that you're trying to serve, what do they need? And find that and fulfill that need, and all the other things fall into place so much easier.
True. Very true. Well, shifting gears just a little bit, because I think this is something that's on everybody's mind. But, I think one of the things that we're all trying to figure out is, how do we use artificial intelligence in this world where we're trying to really draw the line between how much we automate what it is that we do versus where it is that we make sure that we're bringing a human perspective, either to the work or to the participants. I know this is a lot more controversial. Not in my mind, it's not controversial, but I think it's a controversial topic. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I have two larger thoughts. The one is, maybe this will happen sooner than later, but at least right now, the way that I think about AI and use AI, it's not about automating, or it's not about giving up a complete task or use case or scenario to AI. For me, it's a much more fuzzier, jagged line of, I'm doing the research and you dip in and out of AI as you need to, but you're still the driver. So it's not like, I'm going to throw this over the fence to AI. It's like, no, I'm going to use AI to power up my human abilities and make me a better human, but make me a better researcher, right? So that's the one thing. I don't think about giving something over to AI wholesale. But from a jobs to be done perspective, from my experience, jobs to be done works really well with AI because it's solution agnostic. Right. And you're talking about general human behaviors and the way that large language models work and the way that they ingest and query and use the data that they have access to. It is about looking broadly and at a more universal way of behavior. So therefore, asking AI, how do people use UserTesting.com is very different than how do you conduct a usability test, right? Because the one is with a specific solution and the other one isn't. And by being not solution independent, it actually produces fairly good results into the AI frameworks. I have a lightweight framework. We create a job map and have some success criteria that you list and things like that. And AI can be really helpful in helping you generate those things. And I've actually changed my process for doing jobs to be done away from, define your research focus and then go out and talk to people, to design your research focus and then create a hypothesis. Right. And you can use AI to create that hypothesis so that you're not going out to the field. You got 12 interviews to do. And on interview 1, you have a blank page of paper, but you have a job map. It's only an assumption, but you have that. And you might even have a list of success criteria and the emotions and the other elements of the jobs to be done framework. So you're actually going out in the field and you're validating that and completing it. But what that allows you to do, two things. It makes you a smarter researcher, particularly if you're working in a field that is foreign to you. It's easy for us to talk about shopping or groceries or something like that, going to the movies, because we've all done those types of things. But what if you're in a B2B situation and you're working with, technicians on an oil rig platform? It's like, how do I talk to these people? If you have a hypothesis and AI can help you create that hypothesis, you go out into the field not only more informed, but you might actually have something to show them, like a job map in the jobs to be done vernacular, and say, is this what you do? Here, move these stickies around. Change this for me. Put a star on the one that's the hardest for you to do. And you can actually go deeper because you're not creating that model from a blank piece of paper. You're validating it. And then you have more time to go and find where the problems are. So that's generally how I think about AI. But I would never recommend not talking to human beings. So you can go out and be a smarter researcher, and you might reduce your sample sizes as well too, right? Because you're really just validating, and you might get it. You might get the confidence around validation after 6 interviews instead of 12. So you might reduce your sample size. But if we're trying to be customer centric and empathize and trying to have an organizational intuition around customer needs, and you're never going out and talking to customers, that's remiss. To talk about customer centricity and user needs, and but we don't have to talk to a customer. That just doesn't compute in my mind. I don't know. So again, AI is a supplement. It complements your skills, and it powers you up. It makes you smarter, I believe.
Yeah. I just want to throw one thing in there. So, a lot of the folks that I've been talking to have been saying, I want to talk to more people now.
Yes.
Because the capabilities of the platforms that are out there. So I'm curious, you made the point, you may talk to fewer people, but what if you talk to more people?
Yeah.
And,
yes.
Well, how do you see that playing?
It might help you talk to more people, because now I'm not starting from a blank page, and each interview might be shorter or more focused, right? Because of that. You know what I like to think about? Not necessarily increasing your sample size per research project, but now I can do more research projects. That's what I like to think about, is how does, and I'm probably just, I'm increasing the workload of researchers here, but how do you go from being able to manage, a handful of projects to 10 projects at once, right? And being able to do those with some kind of confidence. And I know there's logistics and things like that, so it's not a one-to-one relationship there. But in most companies that I've ever worked for before, user research was only done on a fraction of the efforts and projects and initiatives, right? And we don't have enough user researchers, and it's not valued enough. All those things are true, but I think AI can help bring customer centricity to more points inside of the organization and more projects to inside the organization. That's my hope.
Yeah, I love that point. That's a really great one to keep in mind. It doesn't have to be more people per, it can be just more.
Yeah, right. I think so. I think organizations need that. And then maybe that makes the researcher more valuable too. Again, you might be doing more, guys. Sorry about that. But you won't be expendable I don't think so ever at AI. For me, a user researcher, you can never just do it with AI. Of course, I'm saying that now. In 5 years, somebody's going to play me that clip of me saying never. I just used the word never, which is dangerous. And somebody's going to be playing that and go, Jim said never 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's 5 years ago. The world changes, but I would hope that we stay human focused so that never becomes the case.
I see right now, I can't imagine myself not ever saying that. You got to go out and talk to human beings. And you've been there too. When you enter somebody else's space, even if it's on Zoom, you're kind of entering and you have this, you get present to them, and just that humanness. Yeah, you're taking notes and writing a research report, but there's this contextual, rich contextual bubble that you enter, which you can't replace that, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's so true. So I have to say, so before we wrap for the day, I do have one last question that is really around kind of that look ahead, right? So you just said, I hope we never get to the point where people are totally removed. I don't think we're going to get there for many reasons. But so are there any additional emerging trends that you see that are really shaping that, I guess, nearer future of UX research, but also like the customer experience piece that you're saying?
I think, when I wrote Mapping Experiences in 2016, the question was, what the heck's a journey map and how do I create it? I don't get that question anymore. In fact, there's probably a proliferation of journey maps, and people got them lying around and they don't know what to do with them. That's more of the problem. And, what I'm trying to show now is that, just stick with journey maps for a second, that, workflow diagram, experience map, service blueprint, whatever you want to call it, that those artifacts, they don't provide value to the organization. They're not something you can sell, or the customers don't see those. They're really internal artifacts, and their main purpose is collaboration. Yeah, it's a diagnostic tool, and there might be some diagnosis you can make and come with a conclusion, but those are usually fairly weak, at least from a journey map. The real power of a journey map is around bringing the hearts and minds of the people around you together. Right. So we talk about getting this outside in perspective, right? We got to see things through the view of the customer. And that's super important, right? And journey maps and jobs to be done help you do that, assume that outside in perspective. But the next step is what I call inside across alignment, that you got to get the hearts and minds of all the people who create the experience that you want aligned as well too, because it's not enough that a UX researcher has that experience of the contextual bubble that I mentioned. I love being in that contextual bubble of the customer there, but that's a privileged position. Most people in your organization don't have that. And when we lament the fact that others in our organization don't have empathy for the customer and the customer experience, I think it's our job to show them that, right? And thinking about things like personas and empathy maps and journey maps as a catalyst for a conversation that we have to lead, and that we have to bring that message to them. And I know people are already doing that. I'm not saying it's not happening, but what I see in the future. Oh, the other thing that I've seen since I wrote my book is that stakeholders and others outside of UX are aware of personas and journey maps, and they're asking for those things as well too. So I think it's a matter of two things. One is looking closer at what UX people do, what we do as the basis of collaboration. And we need to think more about the usability of our own stuff. And our users, by the way, are the teams around us and the business stakeholders. Again, and it's, packaging things up with this growth mindset and all those kinds of things. But how do I bring people into a conversation that doesn't necessarily attempt to, hit them over the head with an answer, but through persuasion leads them to the, proverbial water hole, right? So that they can drink on their own. And then, so I think it's also then an extension of that then is actually enabling more people to not necessarily be researchers, but to be involved in that type of mindset, to again, it's not, everyone is not a designer and everyone is not a user researcher. Those specialties we still need, but the mindsets can be imparted on others as well too. So one of the futures for UX that I see is actually enabling the entire organization to be more human centric and to be more willing to adopt exploratory ways of working, to adopt ways of working that are inclusive and creative and human-centered, right? I think that's a role of UX. And I'll just end here. UX for me filled a gap in a lot of organizations that probably shouldn't have ever been there, right? If business stakeholders and PMs and all the people who make decisions around us, if they were really, really focused on the customer and creating customer value, we wouldn't have had that void that UX filled. And I think it's okay that they're hearing these terms and maybe using them wrong, but that's up to us to educate and enable all of those. So for me, the ideal future of UX would be that it would pretty much just go away. And we'd only be left with a handful of specialists like interaction and product designers or field researchers, right? But UX is something that everybody owns. And I think we win if that's the case.
Wow. That's a powerful point. So I will leave the conversation there because we could go on for another hour about that one alone. That one's great. But thank you so much. I think the conversation was very thought provoking for me, and I'm sure it will be for those who are listening in as well. And, obviously I want to make sure that people have a chance to continue the conversation, with you. So how does our audience learn more about you and what you've been doing at Mural and some of your other thought leadership?
And please reach out to me. I love having these conversations. I warned you that I was going to give long answers here. So
all right.
I think I lived up to my promise there, but I'm out on LinkedIn quite a bit. So you can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. I like to connect with people out on LinkedIn, and then you can jump in on a post that I have and comment, or loop me into your posts. I like to jump over and comment there, so we can keep the conversation going. But otherwise, after I launched the Jobs to Be Done Playbook, I created an online resource called the Jobs to Be Done Toolkit. That's jtbdtoolkit.com. And we have some free materials there. We have a video course. Every once in a while, we do a live training. We also do like a monthly meetup, a webinar. If you're interested in Jobs to Be Done, you'll find that all over at the Jobs to Be Done Toolkit. So I think one of those or both of those things I would recommend: LinkedIn and the Jobs to Be Done Toolkit.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. And we'll close here for the day.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was great.